When you're shooting travel videos, you want to be as effective as possible, because I'm sure you don't want to be that person that struggles later in the edit. And of course, you also want your videos to look good. That's why in this video I will share 7 habits of effective travel filmmakers with you that ensure that you always capture usable footage, you catch shots that you would usually miss out, and you also improve your storytelling and your visuals. So let's get into it. We're doing a hike here today, actually having a really nice sunrise, and I'm doing that here with Raymond and Marcus. Can't see them right now. They will also film that, or most of the B-roll here, with the 40mm 2.5 from Viltrox. It's quite small, very travel and hiking friendly, so let's also see what it can do.
But it's not often that it's like this.
Yeah. Yeah, with the sun and the clouds, right?
Yeah,
It's quite rare.
Yeah, it looks like that's not the path. It's probably the least hiked trail I've ever hiked around Chiang Mai. Okay, it's getting steep now, but before I hike up that mountain, let me give you the first habit, and that is to capture your foundational shots first. What do I mean with that is that before you do anything wild with your camera, before you add camera movement or so, you should always get a static shot first and leave the camera running while keeping it steady for 5 to 10 seconds, ideally 10 seconds, that's always better. The reason for that is that during the edit, you probably figure out with those moving shots quite often that they are either a bit too shaky, or maybe the usable camera movement is a bit too short, so you can't actually use it in your edit. And by getting one steady shot always first, you can always be safe that you have footage you can work with in the edit. So that's a very important habit to have when you shoot travel videos. Time to go up now, it's getting sweaty. Ooh, that was quite the hike up there. I think maybe 500-600 meters or something like that. That's how it felt like. Never hiked that steep here in Thailand. Anyway, second habit, that is that you should look into the crystal ball. What I mean with that is that you should always imagine what could eventually happen in the next few seconds or even minutes, because that allows you to get shots that you would otherwise not get. Here's a relatively simple example from my recent Laos trip. There you see the shot where I have this triangular shape and you see the boat driving in between. So in that case, I saw already that I have this shape there, which I can use as a frame for my shot. But just getting the shot with that frame without anything in it would be a bit boring, right? So I imagine, hey, it's a river, there will probably be a boat driving by, and I could get a really nice shot of that boat by utilizing this frame. Just one example, there are many, but it's especially true if you have people walking around or some vehicles or something like that. Every time you have that something moving, then imagine how it will look like from certain angles a bit later in the future, and you will get shots that you would otherwise never get. So let's come to the third habit, and that is that you should use prime lenses instead of zoom lenses. Now, obviously, I don't care about which lens you actually shoot on, but prime lenses oftentimes look a bit better. But what it actually does for your videography is that you stick to a certain focal length and you see what the focal length does for you. Because if you have a zoom lens, for example, and you stand a bit farther away from a subject, you simply zoom in and you're close enough so you think you get the shot all good, but it doesn't have the same look as if you would use a wider lens, for example a 35mm or something like that, and go a bit closer to the subject. You get a completely different look then, and that is why it makes sense to go out a bit more with prime lenses, so that you limit yourself to one focal length and therefore you get more interesting shot. That's also why I enjoy shooting videos like that, where I mostly use one prime lens like the 40mm 2.5 here from Viltrox right now. So that limits me a little bit and I focus focus a bit more on getting actually good shots. And the 40 and 35mm focal lengths are also focal lengths that I can generally recommend for that. They are quite flexible because they are already quite close, but not as close as 50mm or so. They are also still a bit wider than that, so you can do quite a lot with those lenses and also get close to subjects without everything looking weird. So try out especially the 35mm lenses on full frame cameras, or a little secret tip, Viltrox 27mm F1.2 when you shoot APS-C. It's a phenomenal lens, but also this one actually seems to be really good, especially for hiking, because it's obviously much smaller and lighter. And let's directly come to our next habit. Can't see me right now because I'm hiding behind the bush here. Hello! And that is that you should create depth with layered compositions. What that means is that you always have, or usually often have, a foreground, a middle ground, and a background that you should be aware of. And you can either focus on different things, like you mustn't always focus on your main subject, even if that's in the middle ground, for example, or in the foreground. But you can also sometimes just focus on the foreground subject while maybe you're hiking in the background or so out of focus. It's totally fine. It actually makes your shots a bit more interesting oftentimes, because you have the connection that you show the texture of maybe what's going on in the foreground. Maybe I could show something like a tree here, and you see yourself hiking in the background, then you would have the connection that you're still hiking, but you also show a bit of the surrounding. But what you can also use it for is if you have lenses that are a bit slower, kit lenses especially, where pretty much everything is in focus, you only get a little bit of blur there, then you can use those layers to create an illusion of depth, because by being aware of having something really close to the camera in the foreground, but that you don't focus on, and you have somewhat going on in the middle and then in the background, having those layers, that helps you to create an illusion of depth. And a simple technique to get used to doing those things is to simply ask yourself, what is in the foreground, what is in the middle ground, and what is the background, and move your camera a little bit. Like oftentimes you have to move the camera a bit lower so you have something in the foreground directly in front of the camera, and then that helps you to get more depth towards the middle and the background. Looks a bit like rain, right? I would say.
Bad, right? I think
let's walk back. Yeah.
All right.
Better. I don't want to get caught up in the rain when we're going down that steep, slippy path. It wouldn't be healthy. Whoa. I'm destroyed. It's time to get a coffee now. Got some good coffee. Our next habit is that you should use back button focus or manual focus a lot when you shoot your videos. It's a mistake that I see so many beginners are doing, like having autofocus on all the time. The way how I do it is, I always have a button assigned on my camera that switches between autofocus and manual focus, or AF and MF on your camera. Every time I press this button, the focus stays in place because I'm switching to MF. So I always use the autofocus functionality from my camera to focus wherever I want. Then I press this button so it stays where I want. I can also reset the focus by putting the focus point somewhere else, pressing the AF on button. That's called back button focusing. So then the focuses somewhere else and stays where it is as well. That's very important, because sometimes if something is moving in your frame, especially when the focus doesn't stay where it is, it jumps around, and that doesn't really look good. And you are also more intentional with your focus if you keep it like that. That also allows you, in the tip that I gave you before, where you have layered compositions, to keep the focus on the foreground, for example, while you are walking around in the background, because the camera doesn't want to focus on you then all the time. You can just use a single focus point, put it on there, manual focus, and the focus stays exactly where it is. I use it all the time, probably in 30-40% of my shots, so do that a lot more. let's come to the next habit, which is that you should always capture quality sound while you're out there, because it saves you a lot of time in the edit as well, because going through all the sound effects and looking for the right one takes so much time. It's always better to capture that in camera. So what you should do at first is to always have a shotgun microphone on top, because that ensures that you always have usable audio. I'm not just talking about your voice here, I'm also talking about all the background noises that you eventually want to have, a bit of wind sound, a bit of water and whatever is going on in your shot. And the other thing that you can also do is, if you get, for example, a wide shot and you're pretty far away from the sound source, then you can just get a second shot with your shotgun microphone on top. That must look good. You just go close, press the button and record for maybe 10 seconds or so that you have the sound captured and you can just underlay that on the wide shot later. So then you directly have the sound effect and you don't have to search for it anymore in the edit. Pretty important, saves me a lot of time throughout the years. And our next habit is to plan your videos and shots before you start the trip. You can do that in different ways. Like here, for example, I obviously planned everything I wanted to talk about regarding the habits. And of course, you can also plan certain key shots. For example, if you want to give certain informations to your viewers about the place that you're traveling to or so in the video, then you can also plan certain shots ahead that you need to get to give this information and to show what you're talking about. A good way of doing that is to plan in terms of A and B story. Like in this video, the A story was talking about the habits and the B story was the hike. And this is good because there are obviously things that happen that you can't influence, like we're hitting the wrong trail in the beginning. That is, for example, something that I could not plan ahead of course at all. But then you also have the A story, and there you can pretty much plan everything ahead. Of course, if your trip goes completely wrong, you can't do that. But usually you can and you should, because then while you're on the way, you know exactly what to shoot and what to talk about. And therefore you can capture your A story perfectly, and the B story can be whatever comes up during your trip. It's actually sometimes good if something goes wrong, because that makes for better storytelling overall. So that helps you a lot also to be a bit more efficient during your trip, because obviously you don't want to shoot all the time. You also want to enjoy your trip a little bit. And yeah, let's also talk about this lens here, because that also helps you a bit to enjoy your trip, because it's obviously extremely small and lightweight, especially if you pair it with the A7C Mark II here, for example. And now, as mentioned before, 40mm is a great focal length for capturing B-roll on the go. Now this lens here, because it's so light and small and also affordable at $168, it's a lens that I would not expect too much from usually, but I reviewed other lenses from Viltrox in the past, a 20mm for example, which is a very similar lens. And I'm always surprised how good the shots from these lenses come out. There's been no different today. Like if I look at the shots here also on my iPad, they look great. Like it's still a good amount of background blur that we get there. It's beautiful. And also in the foreground, everything that's in focus looks perfectly sharp. I think it doesn't make much sense to do lab testing in terms of sharpness, chromatic aberrations, and so on with these lenses, because it's always a bit unfair at this price point. So you automatically start comparing it to other lenses. So I think if you enjoyed the shots here, if you think they are beautiful and you're looking for an affordable and lightweight travel lens, that you can just bring it and eventually pairs well with the 20mm lens from Viltrox, then definitely look into that. And also to make your travel videos look better, check out this video here in the corner, because you need to master lighting, natural lighting, especially if you want to do that. And there I tell you how exactly I handle that. So check that out as well. I hope to see you in this video or in others. Feel free to look a bit around on my channel. There are lots of tutorials. I'm out for today. It's time to drive back. Kapung krab.